The notice. All right, sorry to have missed on recording my opening statement. But again, just for purposes of the recording, the question that I've pitched, I guess, to open the meeting is it accurate to say that the artist asked for protection before some of the incidents occurred? And what is, what explanation can the mayor and the chief provide of whether protection was provided per the artist's requests and whether that could have been more effective in a way that would have prevented the crime from occurring? And then the mayor was going to start answering that, I think.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to say that if there's any good at all that has come out of this whole situation is that it has put in motion something the borough did not have before, which is a process by which I and the council members and the borough as a whole can be notified about any public art installations before they happen. And I want to thank Dan, who is on this call, Dan Swern and Rebecca Hirsch, for already submitting some suggestions. Just so you know, I've asked John Marin, who is the chair of our Arts Commission, to work with Councilman Hirsch, who is the council liaison to our arts groups, to pull together a meeting to look at some process whereby we meaning the borough, could be informed of any public art that's coming down the pike. Had we known that there was some public art that was coming to the area, we could have prepared the police department and anyone else that should be involved to let them know that this was happening so that they could be on the alert and keep an eye open for any of the artists installing the art. I've spoken with our Arts Commission and other people involved in the arts in Highland Park and told them that I, as mayor, and also the council and administration are anxious to have more public art in our town. And so it becomes critically important for us to find a way to protect any of the artists and the art moving forward. So to get to your specific question, Jeff, I was taking a walk in town one day and saw the artist working on the mural, introduced myself, and we chatted a little bit. And she told me her idea behind the mural and what her timeline was. We talked about when it was to be completed, having sort of an unveiling of the art in town to honor the piece. And then I went on my way with the rest of my walk. The next day that I stopped by to visit, she mentioned to me about a woman in, I think, a white van that drove into where she was and started yelling at her from the car. When that happened, I did reach out to our police chief to let him know. At the time, we had, and Chief, you can, correct me if I'm wrong, we had 4 officers on duty, and we were not able with that staffing to provide someone to come and stand with the artist and give her more protection so she felt safer, as I had hoped we'd be able to. So the chief did, however, have a chance to speak to the people on patrol. And Chief, when you spoke with them about driving by there more often, you want to pick up from there?
Well, I got a call at home Friday night from the mayor that she was informed that the artist was feeling harassed. So when something like that happens, what we typically do is have patrol increase their presence in any certain area. We had 2 people working at that point. It was supposed to be Sunday when she was coming back. I had 2 officers working, and they were stopping by throughout the day when call volume allowed. They were unable to make contact with the artist at that time, but we maintained that posture of whenever there's availability, officers would drive by, officers would spend their time over there. If they had to write a report, they'd be in that area. They would just kind of be more of a presence. And that's typically what we do for anyone on any project like this, whether it's somebody was doing yard work or somebody was doing anything else in town on a private level. So that's what we did, and that's what we maintained. And we continue to do that straight through, even including when the mural was vandalized. So that's
How long, I'm sorry to interrupt, Chief, but how long of a period are we talking about? Which Friday and which Sunday are we talking about?
Friday. The mural was vandalized on a Friday. It was the Friday before that I got the phone call from the mayor.
Okay.
So I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I want to say the 22nd.
Okay.
We started doing this on that weekend, and then we continued through. We thought they were done on Tuesday, found out they weren't, and then started it up again on Wednesday. And then that continued through. In fact, our officers found during these checks the vandalism the second time, not the first time. Somebody called it into us the first time. So we maintained that kind of presence. We also ended up doing a couple other things that I don't want to get too much into, just for the sake of protecting some of the things that we're doing if we have to do it again in the future. But there's a couple other things that we did to try to deter anybody from vandalizing the mural while we were trying to figure out who actually did it.
Okay. I understand you don't want to get into it, and I obviously we've had an issue with the Equity Council in terms of what we can and can't learn about police activity. I guess the question I wanted to focus on is the word deter. If you're trying to deter someone from doing something to a piece of public art or harassing a person on the street, if you're doing something surreptitiously, what can you sort of explain without necessarily, compromising your?
Well, there's different techniques we can use.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're a small police department. If everybody comes to work when they're supposed to, we have 4 guys, 4 officers on the road. We can go down to as low as 2. So there's other things we might do to set up the ability to observe, or the appearance that there's an officer someplace, or things like that.
Got it.
We did what we could do with the staffing we had available. We didn't know this project was happening. We weren't notified ahead of time or whatever. We were kind of reacting to a report of harassment, and then the actual defacement to the mural. We've been in contact with Dan Swern, and through him with the artist, and she's a victim here. I'm not going to get into her business, but we have been working with them to get more details of what happened and the timeline and things like that.
The question I have in follow up to that, and I do want to make room for other people to ask their questions. Since I'm talking, I'll just keep talking. How was this increase in activity, police activity around the mural, communicated to the artist, to the victim?
I don't know if it was. Our officers drove around. The first couple of days we did it, we didn't even see the artist there. Just again, based on our call volume and when we're available to drive by, we must have missed her on one end or the other end. I'm not sure. But
are you saying none of the officers ever made contact with the artist?
I don't know 100% if anybody ever actually stopped out and talked to her. I know that was the end of the painting cycle. I don't know what her hours were working there or whatever, so I'm not sure. We
So
did
no
reach
one
out.
took a report on the harassment even. Until after the vandalism, no one took a report saying, like what did the woman look like? Who was yelling at you from the parking lot? None of that occurred.
No, so we still haven't finished making contact with the artist to get all the details of that kind of stuff. We're working through her company to make contact with her and to find out how she wants to handle these things. We're working through some of those difficult issues now, and even then. So that's, again, I'm not going to put the artist's business out there. I'm not going to speak for her. So I don't think that's fair for her. I don't know if Dan Sworn is on here or not, if he wants to say anything about that when later on or not. But we have been in contact with him, and through him in contact with her.
Okay. I really was, I think I have the answer to my question, but I was really referring to prior to the desecration of the mural, whether anyone, knowing that there had been an incident of some kind of harassment, and it sounds like to me, and again, I don't know the details of the harassment, but it sounds like some form of racial harassment on the street, whether anybody reached out at that point to the artist to try to take a statement and make a report so that officers could be on the lookout for the particular person or persons who may have been responsible for it.
No, that's kind of a simplistic way to look at a more complicated situation. Again, not wanting to put out the artist's business.
Okay, I've been accused of worse things than being simplistic, so I want to refer it over to the mayor in terms of communication to the artist about what the police response to this situation was going to be. Was there some?
I just want to say two things before I answer that, Jeff.
Mhm.
The first thing is, after the situation, I did have a chance to go with Jim Nichols, who is the chair of the Main Street Board. I believe Main Street may have been involved in helping the artist procure the wall. So I did have a chance afterwards to go with Jim to meet with the owner of the building. And we had a conversation. He is adding additional cameras there. And he called me again today to tell me he hopes that by midweek, this coming week, he'll have the additional cameras up. So that will also aid in preventing any future attempts to deface this artwork. So everybody should be aware of that. He's been very cooperative, the landlord. And then as far as what was said to the artist, when she told me about the van they drove in, I told her I would get in touch with the police and see what kind of presence we could have there. I, did not know that there were only 2 officers on duty at the time, and would have liked myself to have seen a greater presence there. But we, again, because we were surprised about the mural going up, we couldn't plan for any additional support at that point.
Okay, did you tell the artist that you could not provide the protection that you had suggested you were going to ask for?
I don't recall, to tell you the truth.
And would this have been like emails with the artist, or just
No,
conversations
me
on the
walking
street?
by and spending time chatting with her.
Okay. I was going to ask, I think you anticipated my next and I think my last question, because I want to give other people a chance to ask their questions. But I understand there's now going to be some kind of process for notification of the borough that there's going to be art going up on the streets of Highland Park. If you had been aware that this particular mural was going to go up, what would have been different? We have the police officers we have, I assume. I don't
Yeah,
Um,
so I don't mean to cut you off, Jeff.
No,
but-
no, you know the question, you can answer it.
Okay. So, one of the things we can offer to the artists or collab or any other art group that might have an artist doing some public work for us is what we offer, as the chief alluded to, other groups that come into town that might need some additional security. And there's a wide range of things that we have offered. I know, for instance, there are sometimes off-duty police officers that are paid by the groups that are organizing things to be more of a presence there, or to, Chief, you can talk more to that than I can. Or to stand by there. I'm not quite sure. There are also other organizations that pay to have police cars there. There are, now that we are putting a process together, what I'd like to be able to do is, within that process, once my office is notified that there's going to be some public art coming that might need some additional security, we could certainly at that point arrange to speak with the chief about, a greater presence when we feel it's necessary.
Chief, did you have anything to add about the special duty process?
Yeah, so our normal staffing is what it is to take care of our normal business, day to day. Sometimes a church group or a synagogue is going to do something and they don't need full-time police care, but they're worried about harassment or something. So this is when we do our increased presence. It's on holidays, things like that. That's our normal, regular police staffing. Other groups, if they want a police officer more full-time to actually their job to be stationed there, they can actually call the police department and hire an officer to act as security for an event. We have a couple synagogues in town that do that now. They do that for football and basketball games at the high school. I don't know if they do basketball anymore, but these football games at the high school, they'll hire a police officer to stand by during the event as security, just to make sure nothing gets out of hand. And it works pretty well. So if we knew it ahead of time, we could have offered that.
How much lead time do you need to offer the special duty, like private?
A few days, so we can call and make arrangements and see if anybody even accepts it, because it's not something the officers have to do. It's a voluntary duty. So typically there's a process set in place for nonprofits where they call a couple days ahead of time. You make arrangements to let them know, we have an officer, or we don't, so they can make other arrangements if they can't, things like that.
I assume that because of I won't say because of, but I assume that didn't turn out to be offered to the artist in this situation.
Nothing like that, no, because again, this came in out of the blue, not knowing how long things were. We were under the impression it was only going to be a day and they were going to be done. We didn't know what was going on with that aspect of it. So we did have a sit-down meeting with Dan from Collab Arts, the mayor and we explained that aspect of it, and we brainstormed a few other ideas that might work better for their organization based on their preferences or how they want to handle things and their finances and things like that. So we had a pretty good dialogue and back and forth. Another thing we brought up is beforehand, have the artists come with Collab Art to police headquarters and sit down with the captain and I, meet some of the officers, kind of give us a timeline when they're going to be working, when they're not going to be working, what hours they're going to be there, they're not going to be there, get a chance to put names to faces with everybody, and things like that too.
I guess that in terms of the order of operations here, those are the questions that I have for right now, and I have another member of the Equity Council here with me. Hayden, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
First of all, I just want to comment on the Chief Abrams and his staff for the quick arrest of the perpetrator. I don't know what it's involved, but I think that's an accomplishment, even though there's something that disturbs the entire community. And I wonder if Chief Abram knows any specifics, like what were the intent of the perpetrator and what was he trying to do?
So he was just charged. There's still a trial and things like that that are upcoming. I really can't comment on what his mindset was or wasn't. That kind of information will come out during the trial from him and from us when things are all said and done. I can tell you it was a very good job of my detectives. They started right away working on this to try to figure out when it happened, how it happened, why it happened. We had great help from the community. The community in that area, the business owners and the residents really pulled together and helped us out. And again, Dan Swearn from Collab Arts helped us out with some timeline information and things that he had noticed and observed that helped my detectives really narrow down the information they needed to be able to identify who did this and then work the process to be able to make the arrest. So my detectives did an outstanding job.
Yes.
Thank
Yes,
you, Hayden.
indeed.
I appreciate the compliments. I'll pass it along to them.
Hayden, did you have anything else?
No, I'm just trying to keep up typing the notes.
That's fine. And it is a challenge with the limited number of people that we have to do this. I guess I'll go around and ask of the people who are on our account. So I'll include Councilwoman Foster on that. Did you have anything that you wanted to say or ask as part of this process?
Nothing to say or ask.
Okay. Since I invited Mr. Swearn from Collab Arts to join us, I promised him that I was going to make him a panel member. It turned out that we don't have panel members and non-panel members. I'll check in with Dan. Dan, did you have anything that you wanted to ask or comment on as we go forward?
Yeah, just a couple things. First off, I do want to thank everyone from the borough, Chief Abrams, Mayor Pearl Mittler, Harry, and Council Member Foster. We haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, so I would looking forward to doing so. Thank you so much for just being as present and as open as you all have been through this process. We really appreciate it and looking forward to moving forward. With how we conduct business and make art here in Highland Park. So thank you. I just wanted, there were a couple of questions that I just wanted to share a couple of notes on, just for the minutes or for the notes. Jeff, you had asked about communication for the weekend following the racial harassment of the artist and communication with the police in terms of what was communicated back to her. Based on the unavailability of the officers. So I had written an email and I know it had come up in my other conversations asking, and Councilmember Hirsch has said this very pointedly to me as to why did the artist not call the police? Why did you not call the police? And then he asked of himself, why did I not call the police? Like this was a question, but I think everyone was everyone very much wanted to document the experience moving forward. So I did so very obsessively, starting with my initial email that Thursday evening while the installation was still happening, and wrote to the mayor, Councilman Hirsch, Councilmember Matt Hale. Was Matt Hale on that? I can't remember if he was. And Councilmember Stephanie Kim Chohan. And I informed them about the harassment that had been happening. And then Mayor Pearl Mittler came to the site on Friday, I think about 2 hours after the artist had experienced a third experience of racial harassment that afternoon. And the mayor
Dan,
did
I'm sorry to
offer-
interrupt you, but
Yeah.
are we talking about the Thursday and Friday prior to the Friday when the graffiti occurred?
No, this was the 22nd. This was the week prior to the vandalism.
Right.
So
okay.
there were
Same page. Okay, got it.
there was the direct harassment of the artist during installation.
Mhm.
And then the following week were the incidents of vandalism.
Okay.
There were a few of us around listening to the conversation between the mayor and the artist. And the mayor did offer a police presence for that weekend. And there had not been any further communication beyond that. I wrote an email on Saturday asking if we would be seeing police officers on site, and wrote a second email on Sunday reporting that we hadn't seen anyone. Would we be seeing anyone today? I did hear via council member Hirsch that he was text messaging with the mayor on Saturday afternoon because he had come by, and letting him know that we just hadn't heard anything about whether or not there'd be police. And he said that, I'm not sure if he was paraphrasing or reading his texts, but the mayor wrote to him saying that, or at least he reported that the mayor had written to him saying that the chief and I are working on a plan. And that was the only communication I had heard from that Saturday afternoon.
Right, and that was the time that I spoke with the chief, and he informed me that we didn't have enough people to put someone there, and that he was having his patrol officers drive more frequently by.
And Dan, was that communicated
I
to
just,
you?
for the record, I just want to be very clear that Mr. Stern did not include me on any of the correspondence. I did not know anything until Seth called me that Saturday morning to inform me what was happening.
You
So
mean the Saturday
when the
morning
damage was
vandalism?
already done, that's when I was brought into the picture. But prior to that, I was on no email. Did I receive any kind of communication whatsoever?
Okay, and you, Councilwoman Foster, you're talking about the Saturday after the vandalism occurred?
Yes, that's when I
Okay.
found out that.
That's
it
when
was
you found out that
vandalized.
any of this was going on?
And
Yes.
I actually, I think one of the first notes in my initial email was, apologies, I don't have everyone's email on council, but for the folks that I do, you're getting this message.
And just to be clear for everyone, we on the governing body cannot email everyone on a particular subject, because that would count as a meeting and would have had to have been announced earlier. So just so you're aware, that's part of the reason why we respond to the council members that have any particular issue in their, what we call their buckets of responsibility.
Okay, so Dan, I don't know if you were finished or not quite, but is it right that once you heard back from Matt Hirsch that the mayor was working on a plan with the chief, you didn't hear any follow-up from either the council members that you had contacted or the mayor or the chief about what that plan might be?
The only further follow-up I had heard in the short term, and I can give you the day and time, give me 1 second. April 25th was Monday. It was Monday, April 25th at 6:30, where the mayor messaged me that she wanted to message about the mural on her Facebook page. And that was the next communication I then had.
And sorry, the message was what? That
I want to post a message about this wonderful mural on my Facebook page. Please email me a good photo of the mural.
Got it. But it's nothing about security.
Nothing about security.
I assume you texted her or sent her, emailed her a picture at some point.
Yeah, I emailed her a photo, I think either the following day or the following morning after that. April 27th, I sent an image.
Okay. And did you give the mayor any further updates on the harassment or any other requests?
I continued to email all the way through the Thursday, I guess this past Thursday. Either every day or every other day with just updates on experiences or operations.
Okay. Was there more harassment after that?
No, there was no further harassment after that Friday. A number of community members made themselves available for Saturday and Sunday, including myself, to just sit with her and be further deterrents. Oh, I apologize. There was one more incident, and it was not directed directly towards the artist, but on Sunday afternoon, there was an older white male driving by in a red vehicle, just yelling, "Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you," out of the window at me while I was sitting there.
Well, they do that on my street all the time, but
It felt a little pointed,
yeah,
contextual.
It's also important to recognize that there are 23,000 cars a day that drive on Raritan Avenue back and forth. So our population doubles at least during rush hours on 2027.
that just makes me feel worse because there's hardly anybody drives on Wayne Street, and I still get the people yelling at me.
We can reroute traffic, Jeff. That's a problem.
Noted. Joking aside, and I have often been accused of joking in inappropriate situations. Dan, can you give us any, I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to, and I don't want to amplify things that we don't want to amplify, I guess, but can you tell us anything about the nature of the harassment that would give us more of a perspective on what was, in your mind, this was racially motivated?
So the specific harassment, as I've been told, and as I've seen in certain media evidence presented to me by the artist, each of the three was reflective of the lack of white representation in the mural. Now, I'm specifically talking about the harassment and not the vandalism. And I'm giving general descriptions for the individuals, just to provide context and the complicated nature of what it means to be thinking about identity for each of these individuals. The first incident was on Wednesday, the 20th, and it was a white woman that approached Amrisa's assistant and indicated to him that there was a problem with the mural because there was no white representation in it and did not appropriately reflect the full diversity of the community. And then, as I understand, followed Amrisa into Dunkin' Donuts and aggressively stared at her while she was there in Dunkin' Donuts. The second incident was, again, as the woman was described to me here, an Asian woman drove up to the mural site with her white husband in the car and described herself as an Asian Muslim. And she was advocating on behalf of her husband by saying that the mural was racist and the artist was racist because of the absence of white representation in the mural. And then the third incident was Friday, I believe early afternoon, where a gentleman who identified himself as both half Black and half white was arguing for the presence of white representation in the mural as a part of his identity, that it should be there, and went on to responding to Amrisa's statement that I'm just doing a job. This is my commission. He went on to say, you know who else who said that is the Nazis, and went on to call her a Nazi for that position. So those were the three instances of harassment, all of which, as I understand, related to the absence of white representation in the mural.
Okay.
I just jump in
yeah,
for
go
1
ahead.
second. I just want to say that none of those incidences were reported to the police at the time they occurred. We didn't find out about any of those until after the phone call with the mayor during that weekend, that, you know, any details or anything like that. No one called, no witnesses called, no passersby called, no Good Samaritans called. So we were unable to investigate those as they occurred. Normally with a situation like that, we'd get the call, we would get witness statements, we would pull video camera tapes, we would have a clothing description, things of that nature, so we can investigate a biased crime. And unfortunately, this is one of the ugly sides of biased crime. The people committing the crimes know that the people whom they do this to are reluctant to report it. They're embarrassed, they're angry, they're hurt, and it's a really hard crime to get people to report this to the police. And this is something that's been going on for a while. I've reported on it on our community forums a few times. But it's, you know, people aren't comfortable working with the police, people aren't comfortable with what happened, they're embarrassed, and they don't call us. And a lot of times when we do get these reports, they're third party. You know, somebody witnesses it and calls on the behalf of the person who's the actual victim. That didn't happen this time. There was no notification to the police on any of these when they actually occurred. I just want to put that out there.
Okay, and
Yeah,
and
just-
Dan, yeah,
Jeff,
go.
If
go.
I could ask, Dan, was she working alone all the time?
No, she was there with her fiance, Zach, who was also her assistant.
Oh, okay, so that was the gentleman that was there
Yeah.
when I met her. Okay,
And I just wanted to corroborate everything Chief Abrams was saying. The only report was the first email that I had written that Thursday night. And the only communication that I think Chief Abrams has been a part of directly with any party adjacent to the project is either via the mayor or myself anecdotally to the project. The officer contact information for Detective Palumbo has been given to the artist. So she knows that she has that information if and when she wants to be able to file that or report the incidents that she experienced. But to date, she has not chosen to.
Was she invited to contact the police prior to the vandalism or only after the vandalism?
Only once Chief Abrams and I got in direct contact. I believe that was last Monday.
Yeah, that was the Monday. Yeah, last Monday. So everything
Monday
else,
after the vandalism. Yeah.
correct. The mayor and Dan and I sat down and talked. But that was the first direct involvement the police department has had in any of this. The
Dan-
indirect involvement, of course, is
Dan,
the-
as we're talking, I think it's important, not Dan, I'm sorry, Jeff. I think it's important that we start talking, especially from this committee, this council, of ways to avoid these situations moving forward. And as we're talking, I had not thought, Jeff, of including you in this group that's going to be putting the processes together in terms of fitting the borough into this whole thing, just so we know when something's coming. Would you want to be a part of that process as chair of the Equity Council, or do you think the folks that are handling it are enough?
I think that if the people from the arts community or the arts representation for the borough is involved, and the people from the public safety side are involved and they're all talking to each other, unless there's some issue between them that needs to be addressed, I don't, I mean,
Okay.
for my, personally, I don't think that there needs to be equity council involvement in it. I am always, I mean, I will say, as someone who, who just is a sort of First Amendment, I do First Amendment law in Ohio where I practice, and some of my alarm bells go up when I hear about, well, we want to know about the art before it happens.
Right, yeah.
That's a concern for me.
So let me let you rest assured what I told John Marin, the chair of the commission and all. In no way do I want any elected official involved in deciding if that art is good or not good and that sort of thing. That's not part of the process we want to be a part of, but we want to know when something is coming that we need to be aware of ahead of time, so that if there's something controversial, like let's say somebody wanted to put something up about how wonderful Russia is, I would want the police to know about this ahead of time. That's the point.
Yeah, and I can tell that I would not be a productive member of a group like that, because if somebody had showed me a picture of this mural before it went up, I would not have been able to anticipate that people would have a problem with it.
Okay.
But other people may be more realistic, I guess, about public reaction to art than I am. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think that I don't need to be involved, and I'm not sure the Equity Council needs to be involved in the sort of pre-planning process for a public safety response to a public art project. But always open to more discussion about that. It is, once again, one of those issues where, given the level of person power we have on this council, we do need to be a little bit mindful of what we're being asked to do, I guess.
If I
Go ahead,
can,
Dan.
if I could jump, thank you. I think there is a place for you, Jeff, in that process, and I think it's different than what the mayor was suggesting. What I do want to share about the mural process, and I received an email back from Councilmember Hirsch on Friday that really got my antennas going about this might potentially be a disaster in terms of what the process is that is as being considered. And I am very much afraid that there is going to be a not a censorship conversation, but a lack of distinction between discrimination based on, let me rephrase this. I'm concerned that there's going to be discrimination happening within the process based on what the individuals participating on the commission deem to be controversial, because I am getting a lot of individuals are saying to me that this mural is controversial. And a lot of what we could have been talking about, a lot of what we could have been doing, a lot of the divisiveness that happened as a result of installation could have been avoided if there was preparation for it. I want to remind the people on this call that all the mural is 3 pictures of persons of color. And that's all it is, with stars in the background. And so I am very concerned about what we might be thinking about in terms of needing a process for vetting these types of pieces.
So
If we feel that,
I want to
if
stop
we
you
feel,
right.
I'm sorry, Mayor, if
Okay,
we
yeah.
did invite Mr. Swern to come and talk tonight, or at
Okay,
least
so
I
I
did,
just-
and I'd
I
like
just
to let
want
him
to-
finish his
I
statement.
just want to make it clear that when I spoke to John Marin, who is the chair of the Arts Commission, we are not asking for censorship at all. I want to be very clear, especially with Dan here, and Dan and I talk pretty frequently. I just want to be clear that I don't want anyone, including the chair of the Arts Commission, to be a censor of artwork. What the process is supposed to be doing is letting the governing body and the administration know that something is coming. That's important, because actually, Dan, even if that were just the constellation, the fact that someone is out there alone painting something also puts, I think we need to, no matter what it is, to make sure that that person is safe at all hours of the day and night. That's my point.
Dan, did you have anything further that you wanted
Yeah.
to say about it? Because I'm not sure if you were able to finish.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I completely agree with you, Mayor. My point was less about what is the process meant to do versus what do we need to have happen that process just isn't equipped to do. And my point was just that the between the harassment and the vandalism and the way it was handled by the borough, I think there needs to be another operative opportunity to actually address what happened around the mural. A process is going to address those safety and installation concerns and communication concerns, but I do believe that there needs to be a different opportunity for addressing some of these bias concerns. And what the two things that I'll share one of the things that I articulated to the mayor and a few council persons was that I recognize that the Equity Commission that was put in place had a 2-year life cycle that I think is outside the norms of other bodies like it. And the advisory council now is down to 3 or 4 out of 10 members in less than 2 years as well. And so my point as someone who is a resident and actively trying to do work in a public way in the borough, I believe that there should be room for speaking to a better, stronger, more transparent process for making sure that these things are addressed consistently, so that I as a resident can engage in public work more comfortably and bring other people into that public work more comfortably.
I agree with you, Dan. And Jeff has been doing his best to try to keep this council going. And, certainly I would welcome you joining him in this if you're interested.
And we can have a further discussion of that afterwards or later or at another meeting. I do want to focus on, so it sounds like, Dan, what you're not necessarily suggesting equity council involvement in this art notice of future art process, I'll call it, but more in general about making sure that we're continuing the work of addressing racism in Highland Park, basically.
And to that point specifically for this process, making sure, like, being invited to understand or audit what is the process that's happening and making sure that that equity is a part of that conversation.
And I appreciate that. And I did have a concern because the first thing I heard of it was at the Borough Council meeting. Councilman Hale, who used to be the liaison to the Equity Commission, his comment about the mural, everyone else's comments about the mural were to the general effect of, this is a terrible thing that's happened. We have some issues that we need to address in the community about racism. And Councilman Hale's comment, which concerned me because I definitely didn't have any context behind it, was we need to talk about the process of how these murals are going up. And I'm talking to Rebecca Hirsch about that. And that, again, that's what made my alarm bells go up, is I'm not sure that would be my reaction to what happened here, because people can get offended about a lot of different things. It doesn't always go to a place of racial attacks. And I do think that's one of the things that, whether it's public art related or not, what I heard from some of the vigils was members of the Black Community Watch Line saying they're getting reports pretty frequently about issues like this in town, and they're not really sure that we're getting an effective response. And those are the kinds of things that I do think the Equity Council is more equipped, if we were fully staffed, to address. If we can figure out whether this is more of a systemic problem with how we're responding to racism and racial incidents in town. I do see a hand raised, and I go ahead, Mayor.
Just one thing. There needs, if the Black Community Watch Line is getting reports from any residents, we need to make sure that the police chief is hearing from them. And I'm not sure if he has. So, because I assume, or Elsie, have you heard anything from them regarding public safety?
I haven't heard anything at all, nothing.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure if the chief has heard anything from them, because he didn't notify me that he heard anything from that group.
I haven't heard.
But we're here, and we're here to listen and to act upon when any of these incidents happen.
So
I'll
Jeff,
say that
So
real quick.
could I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
You have a hand raised.
I have two hands raised. I have one physical hand raised, and I have a digital hand raised. And I saw the digital hand raised first. I do think the next item on our agenda in any case is public comment, and I want to continue the discussion now that the council and its invited guests have had a chance to chat a little bit. The first hand I saw was from Nathan Jeremy Brink, and you're welcome to unmute yourself and make your comment or ask your questions.
Thank you, Jeff, for recognizing me. Nathan Jeremy, I'm a Highland Park resident. I live on North 7th, and I am a professor of history at New Brunswick Theological Seminary and one of the co-directors of the Shelter Project that wrote the original grant that received money from the Henry Luce Foundation to do a number of projects around caring for our most vulnerable neighbors at the height of the pandemic, and to really help us as a community in Central New Jersey think about those experiences of housing and vulnerability. And so this was one of our artistic interventions that we put together as the project. And what I just wanted to say in this context was just to reinforce and reiterate how long, extensive, and careful the process of review around this particular mural was. It was a very, we got the grant in June of 2020. And that's when we first started envisioning what this might be. There were multiple conversations over the course of years. There were community meetings that a number of different people were invited to by CoLab Arts. And there was oversight of the project by myself, representative of New Brunswick Theological Seminary, Colin Yeager and Kristen Obraso-Colfin of Rutgers University, and Dan at CoLab. And all of that is not to sort of credential it, but John in the Arts Council was involved. The Black Community Watch Line was involved, the Affordable Housing Corporation of the Reformed Church of Highland Park. So the idea that this went up sort of without due process, I think is something I want to push back against. Now, it was not solicited by and did not solicit the approval of the council. That's correct. But I want to be very careful in how we characterize the work that CoLab led around this, because it was so heavily involved, arduously so, in seeking community voices, being reflective of a range of community voices. So I just wanted to say that. Then the second thing I'd like to just say briefly is that the other thing that really does bear saying is that the historic traumatization of Black people around calls to the police and issues around race is a much larger issue that I think we need to be careful. The Black Community Watch Line in part is successful in receiving so many reports of harassment and of other incidents, in part because the long history of mistrust and distrust between Black communities and police forces. And so I just think we need to reiterate that point as well, that for some things that constitute intimidation or harassment, there could be any number of cases where someone might be afraid or might have structural systemic cues that tell them that the harassment they receive on a daily basis is not worth documenting, but is definitely not amount to criminal behavior, right? So seeking recourse for personal harassment, and assuming that the police will take that claim as a criminal matter, or even that they will assume that that person is in the right and not themselves in the wrong, right? The fear of structural bias or implicit racial bias is something that is a deterrent to that as a structural feature. And there's plenty of historic and sociological resource and data on that. So I just think that bears saying too in this space, because the idea that somehow, I think one thing that shouldn't be done is, and I'm not saying that's what's being done, but I think we have to be careful that saying those complaints don't come to the police runs the risk of blaming people who are being victimized by harassment, which may not even amount to criminal level of harassment, but is something that they need a place to be able to bring that. So those are my two.
And I think that's a point very well taken, Nathan. But what I would urge is, and I don't know if it's this group, Jeff, but I would urge us to somehow find a way to communicate the concerns that the Black Watch Line may be receiving to the police so that we can take action against people who are harassing people of color. If we don't know about it, then we can't take action. So that's a challenge, exactly for the reasons you were stating. And I don't know what the answer is to that.
And I have a comment on that too, but Harry's been patiently trying to interrupt us. Is there a technical issue, Harry, or?
Oh, no, I wonder if I can comment on Nathan's first point. I'm not at all in a position to comment on the second point.
Go
But
ahead,
on the
Harry.
first point, Nathan, I acknowledge that there was significant conversation within certain communities in Highland Park. As the public information officer for the town, I first learned about the mural when I saw it going up. And I'm also a working journalist who is a voracious reader of news media. I had no idea it was coming. And so I share the mayor and the chief's surprise about it, but that shouldn't have been. I don't know how something can remain as isolated in certain communities as it appears that it was, but it certainly appears that it was. And I mention that in part because I've had numerous conversations with people in the community. And the range of reactions is really broad. But it's fair to say that a good number of them are just surprised. Like, where did this come from? Why is this here? And this goes across ethnicities and different affiliations. So I do appreciate again that it was well worked, right? And there were lots of discussions, but it seems to have stayed within communities of a particular philosophical bent, and not broadly, and not brought. And so one of the functions of, I think, bringing it to the borough leadership is that then it becomes the borough leadership's role to share with the broader community. And so I don't want to criticize and I don't want to place any blame, but I can share in the mayor and the chief's great surprise that this came.
I just want to, very quickly, I just want to say two things. One is, it sounded like one of the people who is in the loop on this project, at least, was John Marin, who is the chair of the borough's Arts Commission, which is a public body that holds public meetings, as far as I understand it. And I don't go to the Arts Commission meetings. I don't go hardly any meetings but my own right now because I'm a little bit busy. And I wish I could go to all the meetings of everybody, but it does sound like there's a little bit of a disconnect between, is the mayor informed? Are the members of the borough council directly informed of something versus does that mean, if they're not, does that mean the borough is not informed? If the borough's chair of the Arts Commission is part of the planning of the project, it seems like there's a little bit of a challenge there. The second thing I want to say before I turn, and John, I see your hand, and I'm John Kovac. You're next. Don't worry. One of the reasons why I wanted to have the meeting this way is just so that we can have a full discussion, and everybody doesn't have to just be waiting for everybody else to finish talking so they can say their thing. So we'll get there. One of the things I just wanted to say in response to what Nathan said and what the mayor said is, I do see a role for the Equity Council in here, and I am not sure we're ready to play this role. But what I would like to see in the future is that this body become strong enough and populated enough and representative enough and credible enough to both the people in the borough's government and to people in all of the different communities in Highland Park, that people can feel comfortable sharing concerns about what's going on in our community with this body, even if it's not, I had the same reaction when the chief was saying, well, if we had known about these bias incidents, we could have investigated. I'm not sure. I don't know the law in New Jersey well enough to know, but I'm not sure that what happened in terms of the street harassment would really have been something that the artist would have wanted to press charges about or could potentially have pressed charges about. But I do see it would have been valuable in compilation or for somebody from the Black Community Watch Line to come to our meeting and say, hey, we're seeing a trend here. There's been some issues here. We'd like to see this happen or this happen. And it doesn't have to be a police response. A police response is not the appropriate response to everything. But I would like to see our body play some role in terms of just making sure that different parts of our community are talking to each other and different parts of our community are talking to the government effectively and the government is talking to them effectively. I now see a lot of hands up, but John Kovac has been
Jeff,
waiting the longest.
Jeff, can I
Yes,
just-
I would
Oh,
like
hold
to,
on one second, John. The chief, did
Jeff.
you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just want to touch on your point before we move past it and forget it.
Sure.
There's different levels to bias. There's bias incident, there's bias crime. I don't know whether or not the incidences that the artist experienced would have risen to the level of a crime or we would charge, but it's still a bias incident. Those incidents need to be reported, recorded, and they get actually reported all the way up to the state police at the Rock, the Information Fusion Center, where they keep these things and they look for trends. The problem with bias crime is it starts as a bully. It starts as somebody saying something, and then nothing happens to them. The police don't talk to them. No bystanders stand up to them, and they're emboldened. And eventually that conversation, the words that they're using to hurt somebody, manifest themselves in other ways, whether it's vandalism, a physical attack, things like that. So it's important for us to know, even if it might not rise to the level of a crime, that this kind of incident occurred, that the person was victimized, that the person is experiencing these things. It's real. It's happening to them. I understand a hesitation to call the police all the time, especially in different parts of our community and backgrounds that different people have. But it's got to get to us somehow. If there is a group like the Watch Line, that's outstanding. It's a way for them, or if the Equity Commission is going to take on this, that's excellent that people have somebody else to go to, but it still has to get to the police. And just to touch on something that the mayor said, don't call me. You need to call the police headquarters. If you call me, you're adding time, you're adding steps. If you call me directly, if you need the police, call the police. And I promise you, you'll get a response. You get an officer seriously, you get an officer that has been trained to handle these things, and the notifications will go where they need to go, the information gets where it needs to get, and it helps us solve, this. I can guarantee somebody who says something, who's that bold to come up to an artist and say the things that they said, that's not the first person they did it to. I'll guarantee it. People don't just wake up and that's not the first time it happens, right? These are people that have done it to others. And it's important for us to track down the original perpetrators of these kind of things when we can. And any kind of lag makes that a lot more difficult. And I get it. I understand. I empathize. But I can't stress how important it is that if you are a victim of bias intimidation, of bias incident, of bias crime, that it's reported to the police quickly.
And I have a question for you. I'm sorry, you weren't done.
No, that's good. Thank you, John.
I have a question for you about that, but I want to wait to ask my question
very
until we give John a chance to
Okay,
say.
Thank you for your patience, John.
I want to second what Harry said about the perception that this was coming from a part of the community that had a certain philosophical orientation that may not be that which is representative of other parts of the town. So thank you, Harry, for mentioning that. I would like to praise Chief Abrams on making a quick arrest in this matter and investigating it thoroughly. I would like to express concern about the fact that one of those bias incidents involved an individual following the artist into Dunkin' Donuts. That would be a more serious level of violation, I would think, than the others. And my two questions for you, Chief Abrams, is one, can I get a copy of the police report?
Yes, if you can come down to records. You have to file some paperwork. There's something called Oprah. You file the paperwork, those documents, and then we will get you the reports that you want.
So if I were to just come in there tomorrow morning and file the documents, I could get the report within how many days or?
I think it's 10 business days. There's redactions, there's other things that have to happen. But if you come in, you speak to our records clerk, Carolyn, she'll be able to help you through the process and fill out the paperwork. I believe there's a way you can do it online through the borough website. You can also send an email to records, RECORDS at hpborough.com. That'll go to our records clerk as well. If you look online, I'm sure you'll find language that will help you write the email. Basically, I'm requesting this information, under the Oprah Act, and you have to give some details, a date and a time that things happened, the nature of the incident, that kind of stuff. A quick Google search should help you get the language you need for the email if you want to do it that way. The easiest way, but it might take a little bit longer, come in, see Carolyn right there. You come into our lobby, our headquarters, you make that first left in the window on the left. Speak to her. She's there 8 to 4. I think she goes to lunch from 12 to 1 or 12 to 12:30. Just go in, see her, and she will help you.
So one more quick question, trying to get a head start on getting the report. Would you be able to indicate if Mr. Santo made a statement, and if so, the nature of the statement?
I cannot.
Okay, and that presumably that would be in the police report.
Everything that you will get will be everything that you're allowed to get under the law.
Thank you very much.
In other words, John, as we've learned from many meetings in the Equity Council, virtually nothing. You will get virtually nothing.
No,
Not because of any lack of cooperation from the chief or the department, but because New Jersey's public records laws are woefully backwards.
For something like this, Jeff and John, you'll actually get a lot more than I think you will. But there'll be certain information that has to be redacted, certain personal identifiers, things of that nature, and anything that's sensitive, for the upcoming trial. But I think if you file, you'll get more than you think. You'll probably get the investigation report and the arrest report.
Yeah, I'm sure that I would get. I've seen enough police reports to know how much useful information can be in there, and to also understand that certain privacy interests absolutely have to be protected. So thank you again, Chief. Appreciate it. I have nothing further.
We did make an arrest, but as always, until the trial's over, he's innocent until found guilty.
Absolutely.
So because of that, there are protections in place for everybody involved.
And I see another hand from Joel W. Before you unmute yourself, Joel, I just want to follow up on the thing that the police chief said just before John Kovac made his statement, which and asked this question. In terms of the bias incidents and the reporting to the central investigative body or whatever, I'm not sure. I'm not as familiar with it. I should be as member of this Equity Council, but is the police department the only body that can make reports of that kind to that group? Does it have to come through the police department?
That's a good question, Jeff, and I don't know the answer. I never thought about it outside us doing it, right? That is a good question, and I don't know.
We'll look into it, but I wonder whether there's for people who are not comfortable working through the police department, and I understand various reasons, it would be nice if there's a workaround.
If you go to our website, there's information there on bias crimes, and there is a self-reporting portal that you can go to. Again, it's not going to come to the police department. And again, the best way to identify the people who are doing this is to have an immediate police response. For example, even if it's on camera, that's great. But if it's 2 days later and we can't identify them by their face because we recognize them, a clothing description is useless. Being able to talk to witnesses that can corroborate what was said, what was heard, the demeanor of the person, things of that nature are all very, very helpful, especially if you want to go more than just a quick report and, you want to find out more details of what was happening. So again, a quick police response is the best. If you can't do that, self-reporting works as well. Go to our website, look up, I can't remember what community forum, I did a whole thing on it. It's still up on the borough's YouTube, but I did a whole thing on like a whole 20 minutes on bias incidents, bias reporting, bias crimes, and how to do it, different ways you can do it, things of that nature. So if you want to check that, but yeah, on our website, there's a thing on bias crime. There is a self-reporting thing you can use. I can't remember the name of the address of the website off the top of my head.
Good enough. Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Mr. Joel W., you have something to say? And if you could, I introduced John Kovac, and I don't think I gave his address. I'm not sure it's necessary in this particular forum, but if you could introduce yourself and so we know who's talking.
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Just barely.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Watachero. I'm not a direct resident of Holland Park, but I am a person of color and also have received the MLK Award from Holland Park. So I think I have an interest in such topics as this, and I do love the community very much. I just had a couple of questions and was curious if I got an answer from Chief Abrams, and then we could have a little further discussion. The first thing I do want to say, though, I do want to iterate and echo Nathan's concern. As being a person of color, sometimes we do not feel willing or even wanting to engage police at a certain level, and it is a very fine line, and so to have that sensitivity in this discussion is important. And I just want to echo what Nathan was trying to put there. As far as the enclaves within Highland Park and the discussions the council and other members have, I am not too privy to it, but I was in this discussion of the mural very early on, being a leader of the Dyer community. We were brought in early in the process, so I'm very surprised that so little was known about this. But my question to Chief Abrams is, I understand you didn't hear about the incidences of harassment at the beginning, but you were aware at some point that there was a tagging event to the mural that took place. At that moment, would you have classified it as a biased crime or just simple vandalism and tagging?
You mean the first incidents of graffiti that came? There was two incidents of graffiti.
Yeah.
The first time that somebody posted paper to the wall with packing tape and had written USA on the paper, and it looked like somebody attempted to write USA in paint on the wall. That was a biased incident. The second portion, when the person came back and made the Stars of David, those were biased crime. That was a biased crime.
Okay, so it was looked at as a biased crime from the very first instance.
Yeah, a biased incident from the first incident, and then it became a biased crime on the second time.
What's the distinction, Chief? I don't mean what's the distinction between bias incident and bias crime. I just mean, why was posting USA a bias incident, but posting the Star of David a bias crime?
The use of the religious aspect of the Star of David changed things from just having a USA flag on there. And you also have to take into consideration, for it to be biased, there needs to be certain levels of intent that we can prove. Just putting the USA flag or the USA on the paper and the paint of USA without having the person in custody and trying to find an intent there wasn't enough for us to determine it was an actual biased crime. It was just a biased incident. Once the Star of David went up there, and that changed things, especially since it was on the picture specifically of the Muslim woman, that changed things and let us go a different direction. And then ultimately, once we were able to determine who it was, and our detectives did all the work they needed to do and contacted Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office Bias Unit, they came back with the determination that it was in fact a biased crime. So there's a process that you go through as you do these things. It always starts as a bias investigation, bias incident, and then it'll move to bias crime based on evidence that we can find, intent that we can or can't prove, and things like that. If you look up the bias statute, it's 2C16-1. There's, I think, 4 elements to it, and each element carries a different test that you have to follow to see if it rises to the level of bias intimidation, which bias intimidation is New Jersey's language for hate crime. All right. So ultimately, this person was charged with the bias intimidation New Jersey hate crime statute for the vandalism.
Okay. And as usual, I jumped in without invitation, but Joel, were you finished?
Well,
Does that-
so So this is where I was leading that to the discussion, and mayor and others that are involved in this and the future discussions about this is, what do we do in those situations that we see a bias incident / crime occur? If this were to happen to a temple or the church down the street, what would the police have done differently, or would it have done something differently to secure the site to keep from repetitive tagging events occurring and escalating this into a criminal type behavior? That's just kind of where I want to
Right.
have the discussion lead
So,
to.
Chief, do you want to talk about the incident that occurred at the synagogue and how that was handled?
So I don't know if you recall, December of 19, I think it was. There was vandalism on the sidewalk in front of the synagogue at First and Johnson congregation. I think that's Avazakum, I think.
Havasaka.
And at first glance, it appeared to be anti-Semitic in nature. People were looking at it, and it kind of blew up on social media while we're trying to figure out what happened and what it was. And again, it was the same kind of investigation where we tried to find out who it was, what happened, and all that kind of stuff. So the investigation pretty much ran the same way it did there as it did for the mural once the vandalism occurred. I hate to use the word standard, but the process was the same. In order to prevent it from happening in the future, I don't know that the police department can. Unfortunately, we can't make people be decent human beings. And we don't have the equipment or the staffing to watch everything everywhere all the time. So we do rely on the public to, if they witness something like that, to let us know. Building owner can put up cameras. I believe the mayor said that they already purchased them, in the process of setting them up. That's helpful after the fact, but it's not a big deterrent unless the person committing the act knows that the cameras are there and there's a pretty good chance they're going to get caught. Unfortunately, people can be pretty awful to other people. They can be selfish, they can be base, they can be evil. And as much as we want to, we can't make those people not do those things all the time. So the best we can do is show that if it does happen, we will find you, we will catch you, we will charge you, and you're going to pay for it. And that's one of the deterrents. Another deterrent is knowing that every set of eyes in Highland Park hopefully is looking for people who are acting that way and will call us and tell us that this is happening, even anonymously. Hey, I just saw this person do this, or I just saw this person say this to that person, things of that nature. So, I mean, we do rely on the community, and this was solved with a lot of community assistance. It wasn't just the police department. We were able to reach out with contacts we had in the community, in the business district, and residents, and they helped us. So that was good.
Thanks, Chief. And Joel, have you asked your questions at this point?
Yes, thank you
Okay.
for responses.
Okay, so the next hand I saw, and I apologize, I wasn't looking right at my screen. Go ahead. So sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Before
Yeah, Hayden,
Joe
go ahead.
leaves, Joe, can you, for the record, can you spell your last name, please?
Sure, it's WATTACHERIL.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, we're having a lot of trouble hearing you, Joel. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, it's my computer. My camera's not even working. It's WATTACHERIL as in Larry.
Okay, so let me repeat, okay?
Aiden, I'm sorry, but I got it this time, so
Okay, you got it.
we
Okay,
can move
fine.
on.
All right.
So I saw a couple other hands, and again, I apologize. I'm not sure I saw the order of them. I'm sure no one will object, but Rebecca Cypus, I believe, was the next person. If you could unmute yourself and if you have a question or comment.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. And I apologize, I was late to the meeting because of a family commitment. But you know, I've been listening to the comments. They're a little bit veiled, so I'm not totally sure that I understand what everyone's referring to, but you know, about sort of different interests with respect to policing in our community. I am a member of the Jewish community in town. I'm visibly Jewish. My family is visibly Jewish, right? My sons and my husband wear a kippah, and it's very easy to pick us out as Jewish. You know, my family in various capacities have been in situations where we've needed a visible police presence, right? As a kind of deterrent to what feels like either threats or, you know, bias crimes, bias incidents, you know, tensions that have been sort of raised as anti-Semitism has been on the rise in recent years. And I do want to just sort of say out loud that there is, I guess, a sort of, there would seem to be a contradiction there to what the, you know, communities of color often feel that they need, which is a sort of backing away from what feels like over-policing in some instances. This is obviously not a sort of circumstance that's specific to Highland Park, but it's one that I think has played out in our community in very troubling ways, right? So where I think there's common ground, however, is in the need for transparency. And, you know, while, you know, again, the visibly Jewish community might feel, well, we need to sort of keep the police on our side because we need them to come to our aid and be a visible presence when those tensions are especially high. And we're very grateful when they do come and sort of stand outside. You know, my kids' school often has to have uniformed police officers from Edison. They go to RPRY, which is just over the border from Highland Park into Edison, and I know that they work closely with the Highland Park police as well. We're very grateful when they appear, they show up, they're a visible deterrent. It seems to me that in the case of this artist, Amrisa Naranjan, what was being asked for was a similar visible deterrent. And in the case of communities of color, again, that's sort of not always what's needed or what's being called for from the community. But in this case, there was that need. There was a kind of record that was being documented of harassment and a sense that the artist wasn't safe and that a visible police presence would have been a deterrent. Again, what is the unifying feature in all of these kind of approaches to how the police function in our community? The unifying element has to be, I think, transparency and a clear understanding of, right, when the police are going to show up, why are they showing up, and when they are being called upon but don't arrive, or there's, you know, there's a kind of outcry and a sense, you know, in this case that local residents needed to come and kind of stand guard to protect Amrisa and make her feel safe. That there's a kind of lack of transparency there, it seems to me, that is not going to help any part of our community. So I just wanted to comment on that and ask the chief or mayor if you have any thoughts about that issue of transparency in particular. Thank you.
So Rebecca, thanks for bringing your points across. I'm one of the things that I created this council for is to advise us on equity issues, which I think are some of the things that you're raising right now in terms of police presence for a person of color who was feeling unsafe. And I'm not sure, I know you said you came on a little later. Not sure if you were here when the chief or I talked about what actually happened when I was able to reach him about Amrisa's insecurity after one of the incidents that had occurred. But the chief did point out, and again, this gets to the issue that we discussed ad nauseum before, which is preparedness. he did point out that he was able to have his officers drive by more frequently where she was, but given that we weren't prepared for this situation with enough people to actually put someone right there. We had to rely on the drive-bys of patrol officers that evening. Chief, I don't know if you want to talk a little more about that. And then we can, this council, this is the place where I'm relying on residents to help me develop policies that we can move forward, that are transparent and do provide the kinds of security, but also policies that would improve equity issues in our community. But Chief, do you want to talk about, answer any of these questions?
No, when we found out, when I found out from the mayor that there was a feeling of uneasiness, that the artist was feeling unsafe, I had officers increase their presence in the area. Unfortunately, we didn't have a schedule for when she was and wasn't there. We have a small police department in a big town, and they get busy with calls for service and people needing help for other things. And they did what they always do when we get these kind of calls, and they try to make their presence known as much as possible. That we received no calls at the time of the incidents when Emerus was actually being victimized by people. When those things were actually happening, the police department was ever made aware of anything. Until that following Friday, we had no idea that there was any issues, any problems there, let alone that the artist was feeling unsafe. So once we found that out, we worked with what we had to do the best we could out there and have officers drive by, stop by. When I finally got put into contact with Dan Swern and was able to get some direct information, I worked with him to have conversations with the artist through him, and to find out what she was comfortable with, not comfortable with, like that going forward. And again, I'm not going to put her business out there, how she wanted anything handled. I will just say that, we did work with Collab to do the best we could to investigate all the claims that happened from the week prior and to find out, develop a suspect for the actual vandalism.
Thank you. If I could just offer a quick follow-up. I know there are other people who
Go ahead,
wanna-
go ahead, Rebecca. We're giving people a chance to follow up on their questions. That's one of the
Thank
reasons we
you.
wanted to have this meeting.
Thank you so much. So just as a point of information, maybe this is naive, but since I know that you do collaborate with Edison Police from time to time, would there have been, with sufficient information, a possibility that Edison could have sort of lent us an officer who might have been able to stand there for the full time that the artist was working? That's just a point of information.
Generally, no. There is, and unfortunately, it's the world we live in. There's liability concerns when officers go into different jurisdictions. There's, things like that with staffing. God forbid, the officer got involved in an incident and was injured, whether it was he was dealing with somebody or he stumbled on a curb in the dark. He's in our town now. We take the liability for that. That's not something that happens unless it's an emergency situation. We generally don't use officers back and forth without a memorandum of agreement between the two agencies for off-duty details, which is a paid thing. And the only reason we can do that is because the contractor assumes the liability for the officer's safety in the event they are injured during work. So that's not something that would typically happen that way. In an emergency, completely different story. If we called for help, we've gone to Edison and helped them when they needed it. They've come here to help us in an emergency when we needed it, but it's just for the duration to make whatever is happening safe. And then usually everybody kind of parts ways unless somebody's involved in something that requires report writing. So no, that's not something that happens a lot. You'll see us over at RPRY sometimes too. We share some of that property of the school is in Highland Park, and some is in Edison. And with that kind of a jurisdiction where there's kind of dual, you might see both officers back and forth there, but that's an exception, not typically the norm.
Thank you.
Chief, I just, all of this raised a question in my mind, and it's just a technical question. When you're describing the police officers that you had available during this time period, you said that I think you said there were 4, or maybe you usually have 4, but you only had 2.
So our squads can be up to 4 during the day and 5 at night.
Okay.
But minimum staffing is 2 based on somebody's out sick or training, vacation, things like
But at this point, it was 4.
I don't remember. I think it was only 2. I know there was only 2 on Sunday, which is when I was told the artist was coming back and we started our patrol. There was only 2.
And my only question was, do those numbers include supervisors, or is that just patrol officers?
So the 2 officers that were working was a sergeant and a patrol officer.
Okay.
And then inside there's just a dispatcher. They're not civilian.
Right. Dan Swern, you had something else to say?
Yeah, there were just a couple of things. I know communication is around the installation is important. I just want to clarify a couple of things because they haven't come up in this conversation yet or in previous ones. The first time someone from borough leadership knew about the project was January in 2021. It's when Councilmember Hirsch first heard about the project and responded with the fact that he would totally support it, being a mural about refugees in Highland Park, and being that it would be at 75 Raritan Avenue. And the second communication piece I want to reference is that in November 2021, I was directly communicating at that point with the Arts Commission and the Main Street Highland Parks Design Committee, because they were the ones who were stakeholders on behalf of the city, on behalf of the borough at that point. And I communicated then that we would be looking at a March installation. We had intended to do it in the fall, actually, but the design process took a little bit too long and the weather had gotten too cold. So we were looking towards March, and I communicated that with them. And we pushed it back a couple of weeks because, as you all experienced, it was a little too cold this March to do anything reasonable outside at that point. I did want to ask a question, Chief Abrams. This is the first I'd heard about the distinction between the USA graffiti being the bias incident and the Star of David being the bias crime. So I'm just want to clarify, like, if there is a code or some type of manual that articulates that, because the way I understood the initial incident with the USA graffiti was that it was xenophobic because the USA was written over adjacent and over the face of the woman with hijab. And so I took that to be an incident directly indicating hate. So I'm just curious if there is a distinction, if there's something memorialized anywhere that structures that difference.
So when we have something like this, we have 2 officers are assigned to our bias liaison. So they are liaisons to the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office Bias Crimes Unit. Detective Palumbo, who you spoke with, is one of them, and that's one of the reasons why I had him handle a portion of this investigation. When any kind of bias or questionably biased incident arises, or anything that you think anything an officer thinks might have a bias component to it, we have to go through these checklists, basically, get certain information, try to determine to our best what we have, and then we contact the prosecutor's office. Without having a person in custody, and without having an intent, or without having like a knowing intent or kind of the basis behind why they did what they did, it generally doesn't rise to a bias crime. Once you have the person and you can talk to the person, you can figure out what happened, then it adds that extra layer. I don't know exactly what the bias unit decided to make an incident versus a crime ultimately. But when we first called it in, the first part of it was work as a bias incident, which really is the same work. There's just no person to attach to it. And then once we made the arrest and were able to continue our communication, we worked it as a bias crime. And then the prosecutor's office authorized the hate crime, the bias intimidation charge for the suspect.
Thank you.
Does that
Councilwoman
Not-
Foster, first of all, my
Not
understanding,
100%, but yeah.
I had the same question, Dan, and I appreciate the additional attempt to answer it, Chief, but I do think that from a layperson, non-police officer's perspective, it did seem pretty obvious that putting USA over the face of a woman wearing a hijab would have the same essential elements as the Star of David incident.
Right. Well, again, we didn't have a suspect. We didn't have a person. There's an intent level in there. If you read the statutes, that's what's there. So
I intend
unfortunately,
to.
yeah, good.
And I'm not trying to argue with you about what,
Yeah.
again, you may have better advice than we do. I just, I think that the average person on the street, we probably had the same reaction, but.
Right, and that's completely understandable. And that's one of the frustrations we have with reporting of bias incidents. People come and they report something that they think is a bias incident, and it becomes a First Amendment issue. And that's kind of the direction things will go sometimes. There has to be, when you read the statute, it'll be more clear. I don't want to stop and pull my phone, get the statute out and actually read it to you. I think that would be not helpful to anyone.
Absolutely. We're going to do some more research on this question for sure. And, and we'll educate ourselves.
Right. So there's a line between First Amendment and you're an attorney that does First Amendment issue stuff. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, not in New Jersey, but yeah.
Okay. So there's a line between, what you're allowed to say under the First Amendment and what you're not allowed to say, because it rises to the level of that bias type stuff. So that's unfortunately, that's just the way the law is. It does seem arbitrary. It does seem kind of like cherry picking a little bit. This is and this isn't. This might be. This definitely isn't. Kind of stuff. I get that, but my phone's.
I don't think any. I mean, as far as I can't speak for the entire 3.5 members of the Equity Council, but I don't think that's the main concern that I have in this situation. I want to talk about that in a minute. I understand the mayor will need to be leaving us in a few minutes, and I saw that Councilwoman Foster had her hand up.
And I have to grab a.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
I have to leave also, but before I do, I just wanted to be clear from Mr. Sworn that you said in January of 2021, you had a conversation with the chair of the liaison to the Arts Commission?
I had been in conversation with Rebecca Hirsch from Main Street Highland Park, and then she brought in everyone that needed to be included in the conversation. So it was January 2021. It was included Javier Zavaleta, who I believe is her assistant, Jenny Chapman, who is on one of her committees, James Nichols, who is the chair of the design committee, and I believe also the president of the board, and then John Marin and Matt Hirsch.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
There we go.
Was Matt the liaison to the Arts Commission at that point?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And yeah, I think we can wrap this up in a couple minutes. I do want to close. I really want to thank everybody for coming in and participating. I think one of the things that's been holding us back as an equity council is that we have not had a lot of, first of all, we don't have a lot of personnel right now, and we're going to try to fix that. But second, we just really have been having trouble getting members of the public to come to our meetings and ask tough questions and make informed statements and things like the things that we count on the public to do. The public is the fuel that makes public bodies actually work. And so I really appreciate members of the public showing up to this meeting. And I want you to stay on the line just because I think the last point of discussion that we need to have is about when the next meeting is going to be. Hayden, you're my only person here, but is it okay with you? Hayden, would you be available if we just shifted our meeting to June 20th instead of June 13th, which is our regular scheduled time?
That should be fine.
Okay, and I think that we're going to still have it at 6 p.m. because that's the time that is set according to our membership. I don't know, we're talking about moving to in-person meetings rather than Zoom meetings for the Equity Council, so long as conditions allow that. I think I'm gonna have to send out an email to the group and see what people think about it, because I don't want to exclude anybody, and nobody's here to actually answer that question except you and me, Hayden. But
Jeff,
Hayden, if you have any discomfort about it, we can just do it by Zoom.
Jeff, if you could also include the borough administrator as a CC on there,
Sure.
just so in case we have any situations, with COVID.
You don't even need to explain why. I'll copy her.
Okay, thank you.
So taking that, so members of the public, if you want to attend our next meeting, we can certainly have more discussion of this in the public comment. You can comment on anything you want in the public comment. It will be June 20th at 6 p.m. and stay tuned as to whether it's going to be at Borough Hall or by Zoom. I will just say, I want to say, because I have not expressed my actual opinion about stuff. I've mostly been asking questions. I do think that the one thing we need to think about and focus on is not necessarily what should the police response have been, or what personnel were available to do what kind of police response. But if it was me, if it was my house, and I put it, somebody confronted me about a yard sign at my house and said, started making statements that I interpreted to be threatening or racist, or led me to believe that there might be a crime at my house, and I asked for assistance, and the assistance was that there was some promise or a suggestion that assistance was going to be coming. I think the minimum that I would need from the borough is clear communication about the fact that the assistance was not coming, or that the assistance was going to be coming in a different form than I expected, so that I could take the appropriate measures on my end to make sure that I and my family were secure, my house was secure. And I think that's something that we need to do some soul searching about, is why could there possibly have been any confusion on the artist's part about the idea that there was going to be an officer stationed, and where did we drop the ball there? Because that's what I really haven't got the sort of clarity on. So in terms of going forward, I'm glad that there's going to be communication about public art. I'm glad there's going to be more public art. I want to hear more. I want members of the community to be talking to each other more. And if this council can facilitate that, I think that's great. But I think at a basic level, I think communication from the borough to people who ask the borough for help needs to be better. And I think that, especially when it involves an issue of equity and an issue of threat based on race, I think that that's something that would, that's the kind of thing that builds confidence in people asking for help from the borough, asking for help from the police. We did a lot of detective work to track down the person who committed the crime, and maybe not enough detective work to track down the artist and let her know what was going on and what could and couldn't be done. So that's my reaction. Again, I don't speak for the whole Equity Council because I can't, because we don't have enough people to vote on anything right now. But that's my reaction.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
Jeff,
So, Hayden, let's move to adjourn.
Hey, I second it.
Jeff, I have a quick question
Sure.
for you. We're looking for volunteers. We need a diverse group of people to take photographs for a thing we're doing called Street Smart. We're having a photographer come and taking pictures of our downtown area, and we need people that represents Highland Park to be in the photographs, crossing the street and things like that. We're going to push this campaign out about pedestrian safety. I'm trying to find a way to get a group of people that would represent the people who live in our town and come visit our town. And I was wondering if you could help me out with that. I'm going to talk to Ashton at Zone 6 to see about having some young people.
Yeah, I might consider, I'm sorry to punt on this, but I don't necessarily have an avenue for you on that. I might consider
Okay.
consulting the Human Relations Commission.
Okay.
They have more members than we do, and
Okay.
therefore more diverse members than we do.
Okay.
So you
I
might want
don't
to talk
really
to
need members of the
Norma,
group.
or
I'm just looking for an avenue to approach more than one group of residents at a time to try to coordinate this so we can get it off the ground.
yeah, unfortunately, we used to have a communications committee on this Equity Council, and every member of the communications committee, except for I think Hayden joined it at the very end. But
was,
pretty much every member of the
last-
communications committee has left us.
Okay. All right.
But Chief, I I can communicate to the Chinese community and maybe get a few
Okay.
Asian kids.
That'd be great. Hey,
So,
is it
send me
okay
an
if I
email.
email you this? Email you about
Sure,
this?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
sure.
have your email from this invitation. I'll send you an email tomorrow.
The other thing
Okay.
I wonder, Chief, have you talked to the Safe Walking and Biking Committee?
Yeah, they're part of this too. This is kind of where this all started. We're also using Keep Middlesex Moving. Now we're getting the advertising part of this off the ground, and we wanted to personalize it to be Highland Park. We didn't want to use stock photos of like downtown Princeton or something. We wanted it to be our town. But to do it, because it's going to be a social media and print campaign, we can't just take random photos because we're going to use those people's pictures and things. So we
Sure.
need people to know that'll sign off that, yeah, they're okay with their likeness being used on these posters, on this social media post, on these bar coasters, on these whatever. So it's not as easy as just going downtown and snapping some pictures. We have to kind of stage it. So
Just make sure you get some white people in the pictures, because I understand that people get really upset if there's not enough white representation in the images that go up around town.
very good, Jeff. Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Okay,
Good night.
thanks.